Chapter 1. The Empty Chair. The first mystery after the shooting was not a fingerprint, bullet, or witness. It was an empty chair. At 12:30 p.m., gunfire cracked over Dealey Plaza. Within minutes, officers ran toward the Texas School Book Depository, the brick warehouse above the motorcade route. People pointed everywhere. Some said the shots came from the grassy knoll. Some looked toward the railroad yard. Others stared at windows, trying to sort echoes from fact. Inside, the official story narrowed. Workers were questioned. Roll was checked. One employee did not seem to be where he belonged. Lee Harvey Oswald. He had been hired only weeks earlier, a warehouse hand in a building that just happened to overlook the president's route. That may be coincidence. In this case, every coincidence arrives already wearing gloves. This is AI True Crime, and today we continue our look at the assassination of JFK, with a look at Lee Harvey Oswald. Killer or patsy? Oswald was not arrested in the depository. Keep that in view. If he had fired from the 6th floor southeast corner, abandoned a rifle, crossed the building, and slipped out, he did it during the briefest, loudest window of the day. He was not caught with a weapon. He did not become the suspect at the scene. He became the suspect after he was gone. The official account says he left, boarded a bus that stalled in traffic, got off, took a cab, returned to his rooming house in Oak Cliff, picked up a jacket and a revolver, then walked back into history. It is a strange route for a man supposedly fleeing the murder of the most protected person in America. Not impossible. Strange. Strange is not proof. Strange is where proof starts asking for company. Police eventually found a rifle, spent shells, and boxes arranged like a sniper's perch. But the building had not been sealed at the instant of the shooting. People moved. Officers moved. Employees moved. Reporters would soon swarm everything. The scene was less a preserved crime site than a wounded hive, and somewhere in that hive, Oswald became absent. That absence created a script. A man leaves a building. A rifle is found there. The president is dead. The missing man has a political past designed for headlines. Marine, defector to the Soviet Union, returnee, pro-Castro leafletter, unstable husband, drifting employee. Before the case had cooled, the suspect came preloaded with motive, foreign intrigue, and a biography shaped by what America feared. But in the first hour, none of that was proven. There was only the empty chair. The conspiracy does not have to begin with a second gunman. It can begin with timing. Oswald had the perfect job, window, and day. He had the perfect incriminating past. He left at the perfect moment. Then another body fell. Officer J.D. Tippit was killed in Oak Cliff roughly 45 minutes after Kennedy. That second killing transformed Oswald from employee into fugitive. Without Tippit, the police have questions. With Tippit, they have urgency and a reason to hunt hard. The official story says Tippit stopped Oswald because he matched a broadcast description. Maybe he did. But the description was broad. White male, slender, about 30. Thousands of men in Dallas could have lived inside those words. Why Tippit? No answer is clean. Oswald's path through Oak Cliff feels both random and too neat. He is supposed to be running, yet he moves by bus, cab, sidewalk, and residential street, like a man following a half-remembered appointment. He goes home, but does not stay. He takes a weapon, but does not disappear. He enters a movie theater without paying, as if hiding inside a plan that has stopped making sense. This is where the case splits. In one version, Oswald is the lone assassin improvising badly after succeeding beyond his imagination. He kills Kennedy, flees, kills Tippit when cornered, ducks into the Texas theater, and fights when police close in. It is ugly, human, and possible. In the other version, Oswald is not the author of the plot, but the signature left at the bottom of it. His job, politics, rifle, escape, and quick link to Tippit's death form a chain so convenient it almost shines. He does not need to be innocent for the story to be larger than him. He only needs to be useful. By mid-afternoon, the empty chair had found its body. Lee Harvey Oswald was dragged out of the Texas theater, alive. That should have been the beginning of the most important murder trial in American history. Instead, it became a countdown. 48 hours later, Oswald would be dead. Chapter 2. The Second Dead Man. The president was not the only man killed in Dallas that afternoon. That fact should matter more than it usually does. Officer J.D. Tippit enters the story like a hinge. Before him, Lee Harvey Oswald is a missing employee from a suspicious building. After him, Oswald is a cop killer. The difference is enormous. One version gives police a man to question, the other gives them a man to chase, surround, and fear. Tippit was a Dallas patrolman, not a national figure. He was working Oak Cliff while the city convulsed miles away. The president had been shot. The radio was alive with fragments. Descriptions moved through the air, thin and urgent. White male, slender, around 30. Maybe 5'10", maybe 165. A description broad enough to catch half the city if the city happened to be scared. At about 1:15 p.m., Tippit stopped a man near 10th Street and Patton Avenue. Or the man stopped near him. Even that little motion matters. In assassination cases, verbs become evidence. Stopped, approached, spoke, turned, fired, ran. The official story says Tippit pulled alongside Oswald, exchanged words with him through the passenger window, then got out. As Tippit moved around the car, Oswald shot him. Several times. Close enough that this was not distant politics anymore. This was a man on a street, falling beside his patrol car. Then the killer walked away. Not sprinted, according to some accounts. Walked. Moved through the neighborhood, shedding traces, seen by witnesses. Carrying a revolver through an American afternoon already broken open. This is where the case becomes almost too useful. The Tippit murder supplies what the depository alone did not. Panic behavior, flight, violence after the fact. A second body that looks like consciousness of guilt. If Oswald killed Tippit, then he is no longer merely associated with a rifle and a building. He is acting like a desperate murderer. But if the Tippit evidence is wrong, pressured, mistaken, or arranged, then the entire case against Oswald changes temperature. Because Tippit does not just die in the story. Tippit points. He points police toward Oak Cliff. He points witnesses toward a fleeing man. He points the investigation toward the Texas theater. He helps turn Oswald from suspect into quarry. And the timing is brutal. Kennedy is shot at 12:30. Oswald is said to leave the depository, take a bus, leave the bus, take a cab, reach his rooming house, get a jacket, get a revolver, leave again, and appear in Tippit's path before 1:15. It can be made to fit. That is not the same as saying it rests easily. So much of the assassination lives in that gap between possible and comfortable. The witnesses are the spine of the Tippit case. People saw a man. People heard shots. People saw flight. Later, people identified Oswald. And in ordinary crime, it might be enough. But nothing about Dallas was ordinary after 12:30 p.m. The whole city had been thrown into emergency. Police wanted a suspect. Reporters wanted a name. Witnesses were exposed to pressure, rumor, fear, and photographs. Memory does not record trauma like a camera. It edits, it fills, it obeys force. The revolver matters too. Oswald was arrested with one. Cartridge cases were recovered near the Tippit scene. The official case tied them to the gun. But here again, the evidence arrives in motion, handled by people under pressure, moving from street to station to courtroom that never happened. That missing courtroom matters. A trial would have forced the Tippit case to stand up under cross-examination. Every witness, every time estimate, every shell casing, every officer, every radio call, every contradiction. The prosecution would have built the bridge from Dealey Plaza to Oak Cliff, and the defense would have tested every plank. Instead, the bridge became history before it became law. Tippit himself gets swallowed by the larger murder. That is another injustice. He becomes a function in the Kennedy case, a necessary second corpse in the official narrative. But he was also a husband, a father, a working policeman, and a man who had no reason to know he was stepping into the machinery of the century. Maybe Oswald was moving toward a contact, a pickup, a hiding place, or a trap. Maybe the second killing was not an accident of flight, but the moment the net tightened. The conspiratorial version does not require Tippit to be corrupt. It only requires him to be placed. A patrolman in the right neighborhood, a broad suspect description, a man walking alone, a confrontation no one can fully reconstruct because the two men closest to it would both be dead within 48 hours. By the time police reached the Texas theater, Tippit's death had done its work. He was the man accused of killing a president. He was the man accused of killing a cop, and in America that second accusation may have mattered most. Chapter 3. The Texas Theater. The hiding place was a movie theater. That is almost too perfect. After Tippit was killed, the trail moved through Oak Cliff in fragments. A man seen running, a jacket discarded, a gun carried, a shoe store manager noticing someone who looked wrong. Not wrong in the criminal mastermind sense. Wrong in the way a person looks when he is inside a day that has become larger than he can manage. The man slipped into the Texas theater without buying a ticket. The movie was War is Hell. History has no obligation to be subtle. Inside, the theater was dark, ordinary, and briefly safe. A place where a man could disappear into rows of strangers and reflected light. Outside, Dallas was turning into a hunt. Police cars converged. Officers had a dead president, a dead patrolman, a suspect description, and now a report of a man ducking into a theater. The official version is clean. Oswald was hiding. The police came in, the lights came up. He was spotted. He resisted. He pulled a revolver. Officers wrestled him down. But the theater scene feels less like an ending than a stage cue. Oswald was not found in an alley, bus station, rail yard, motel, or borrowed car. He was found seated in public, in a place anyone could enter, with no escape route worthy of the word. If he was fleeing, he chose a strange last refuge. If he was waiting, the theater makes more sense. Waiting for whom is the dangerous question. This is where the assassination begins to acquire its permanent fog. There are moments that can be explained one way and then another, both versions possible, neither version fully satisfying. A guilty man may hide badly because he is panicked. A framed man may hide badly because he does not yet know he has been framed. A participant in something larger may sit in the dark because he believes someone is coming. The police entered with force. They moved through the theater. A patron pointed. An officer approached Oswald. Then the struggle began. This detail matters. Oswald was taken alive. In that instant, the entire case changed. Whatever had happened in Dealey Plaza, whatever had happened on 10th Street, the man at the center of the story could now speak. He could confess, deny, name names, ask for counsel, contradict witnesses, explain the rifle, explain the revolver, explain the bus, the cab, the rooming house, the theater. He could be inconvenient. The official story needs the theater to be the moment the assassin is caught. The conspiratorial story sees something colder. The patsy is collected before he can vanish in the wrong direction. The arrest itself was chaotic. Oswald shouted. Officers struck him. He struggled hard enough that the arrest photographs show a face already marked by violence. Later, those marks would become part of the image. Oswald, bruised, defiant, almost smirking, led through hallways as if the law were moving him and the cameras were consuming him. But listen to what the arrest did not produce. No rifle in his hands, no escape plan, no written manifesto, no list of co-conspirators, no clean confession, no immediate explanation that made the nation exhale. Just a man with a revolver, dragged from a theater seat, saying he was not guilty. That denial begins here, even before the famous phrase. The theater is where Oswald stops being an absence and becomes a voice. It is not a trusted voice. It is not a warm voice. It is not even necessarily an innocent voice. But it is the only voice the accused man has, and it arrives under fists, flashbulbs, and sirens. A true trial would have started with the theater. Why was he there? Why that theater? Why no ticket? Why no real escape? Why fight police if he had nothing to hide? Why stay seated if he had killed the president and a patrolman? Why carry the revolver? Why not use it successfully? Why did the most wanted man in America look less like a fugitive mastermind than a man whose instructions had failed? The Texas theater gave police their suspect. It also gave history its first great unresolved image of Oswald, not on the 6th floor, not firing a rifle, not killing Tippit, but sitting in the dark, waiting as the story closed around him. Chapter 4. I'm just a patsy. By the time Oswald reached police headquarters, he had already become more symbol than prisoner. He was not hidden away. He was displayed. Reporters crowded the hallways. Cameras waited at doorways. Microphones pushed toward his face. Police moved him from room to room through a building that felt less like a secured station than a theater with badges. The world had just watched a president die. Now it wanted the man who did it, or the man it had been told did it. Oswald gave them something stranger. He denied everything. He denied shooting Kennedy. He denied shooting Tippit. He denied owning the rifle. He denied being part of the crime. He asked for a lawyer. He asked for John Apt, a New York attorney known for defending left-wing causes. That request alone added another layer of political shadow. Even his choice of counsel sounded like a clue. But there was no clean interrogation record, no complete tape, no preserved question-and-answer transcript that could be played for a jury. The most important suspect in modern American history was questioned for hours, across multiple sessions, by different officials, during a national emergency, and what remains is partial, filtered, reconstructed. That should bother everyone. A guilty Oswald might lie. Of course he might, but lies are evidence only when they can be tested. What exactly was he asked? What exactly did he answer? Who was in the room? What did they hear? What did they write down later? What did they forget? What did they need him to have said? This is the case without a voice recorder. The famous line came in the hallway. Reporters shouted questions. Oswald, surrounded and jostled, said he did not know what he was being charged with. Then came the phrase that never left the case. I'm just a patsy. A patsy is not merely an innocent man. A patsy is a used man, a front, a planted fool, someone arranged to take the fall while others leave through cleaner exits. That word is the reason Oswald could never be only a suspect again. Maybe he was lying. Maybe it was a desperate performance by a man who understood that history had caught him. Maybe he knew the evidence was already too heavy and tried to create a fog around himself. Or maybe he used the only word that described the shape of the trap. The police had problems. They had a rifle that needed tying to him. They had a revolver tied to Tippit. They had witnesses, lineups, a paper trail, politics, and a suspect who would not confess. They also had a press corps feeding on every movement. Officials made statements before the case was ready. Details hardened in public before defense counsel could challenge them. The machinery was moving faster than law. Oswald was questioned, but not truly represented. He asked for legal help, but the process did not slow down. But the lineups themselves would later be criticized. He was moved through reporters again and again, as if public exposure were part of the procedure. The conspiratorial reading does not require every cop in Dallas to be corrupt. It requires only pressure, fear, anger, bad practice, a city desperate to show it had caught the killer, a federal government desperate to prevent the murder of a president from becoming proof that America itself was penetrated, manipulated, or weak. A lone assassin is horrible. A conspiracy is destabilizing. A foreign conspiracy is unthinkable. Oswald's biography pointed in dangerous directions. Russia, Cuba, Marxism, defectors, propaganda, embassies, leaflets, surveillance. If he was merely a disturbed man, the country could grieve and punish him. If he was connected to something larger, the murder of Kennedy could become a doorway to war. That possibility hung over every question in that police station. So the official story began to form around him while he was still alive, not yet proven in court, not yet challenged by defense, not yet weighed by a jury. Formed. The man in custody kept interrupting that formation. He said he was not guilty. He said he was being denied proper counsel. He said he was a patsy. He looked less like a mastermind than a cornered, angry, frightened man, trying to understand how much of the script had already been written. And that is the terrible power of this chapter. If Oswald was guilty, the police had him. They had the one living person who could answer the questions America needed answered. If Oswald was not alone, the police had something even more valuable, the loose end. Either way, the clock was running. The interrogation room should have been where the truth began. Instead, it became a sealed chamber, remembered by others, summarized after the fact, and haunted by the words of a man who would soon be unable to say anything else. Chapter 5. The evidence locks in. By Friday evening, the loose pieces of the case were becoming a story. Not proven in court, not tested by defense, not weighed by a jury, but already moving toward certainty. The center was the rifle, a Mannlicher Karkaner 6.5mm, found on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository after the president was dead and Oswald had left the building. It was not found in his hands. It was not found beside him. It was found hidden among boxes in a workplace already disturbed by police, employees, and emergency motion. The official story says Oswald ordered that rifle under the name A. Heidel. That alias matters because it makes the evidence feel personal and secretive at the same time. Heidel becomes a paper version of Oswald: post office boxes, false identification, mail orders, revolutionary posing. A man with an alias and a rifle looks like a man preparing for history. But the case had a strange neatness. The rifle pointed to Heidel. Heidel pointed to Oswald. Oswald pointed to Russia, Cuba, Marxism, defectors, leaflets, and every Cold War fear America carried in its bloodstream. The evidence did not merely identify him. It explained him. That is where the unease begins. The physical case had weight. The rifle, the empty shells, the 6th floor window, the paper bag, the missing employee, the revolver, the dead patrolman, the theater arrest. None of that is nothing. Together, though, the pieces form a portrait so complete it almost looks composed. The paper bag is the perfect example. The official story says Oswald carried a long package to work that morning and said it contained curtain rods. After the assassination, that package becomes the way the rifle entered the building. Maybe that is exactly what happened. Maybe he lied because he was carrying the murder weapon. But without a trial, every ordinary detail is frozen in its most incriminating form. A courtroom would have slowed the machinery. How long was the package? Who saw it? How was it carried? Could the broken-down rifle fit? Who found the bag? Who touched it? What changed between memory and testimony? Those questions should have been asked while Oswald sat at the defense table. Instead, it became arguments for later. The backyard photographs did the same work in public imagination. Oswald stands with weapons and political newspapers, looking like a propaganda poster made for his own conviction. If genuine, they are damning. If manipulated, they are terrifying. Either way, they gave the country an image of the villain before the villain had been tried, and Oswald kept denying it. He denied the rifle, denied the murders, denied the whole shape of the accusation. Guilty men lie, but denials matter when the state never has to answer them in open court. The lone gunman theory had another function beyond solving the crime. One angry misfit could be arrested, hated, and punished. A conspiracy might mean Cuba, Russia, the mob, intelligence work, anti-Castro operations, or something inside America itself. One man was horrific. More than one man was destabilizing. So the evidence had to do two jobs. It had to point toward Oswald, and it had to point away from catastrophe. That does not mean every piece was planted. It means the case was needed too badly, too quickly, by too many frightened institutions. Once the locks began clicking shut, doubt became dangerous. The rifle had a name. The name had a suspect. The suspect had a past. The past had a motive. By Saturday, Dallas had its killer. Chapter 6. Jack Ruby enters the frame. Jack Ruby did not arrive from nowhere. That is the first thing to remember. By Sunday morning, he would be remembered as a sudden figure in a gray hat, stepping from the crowd, arm extended, pistol in hand. But Ruby had been moving around the edges of the case before the basement. He was not a stranger to Dallas Police Headquarters. He was a nightclub owner, a hustler, a man who knew cops, reporters, strippers, gamblers, and men who lived by favors. Ruby belonged to the city's underside, but not so deeply that people treated him like a mastermind. That may have been his greatest advantage. It is possible to be invisible. The arrangement sits in the record like a door left unlocked during a storm. Then Ruby appears, not as a phantom, but as a man whose path through the morning became part of the mystery. He sent a money order. He moved through downtown. He entered the police basement through a route that should have been controlled. He reached the exact place where Oswald would pass at the exact moment Oswald passed there. The official version calls that luck, anger, and opportunity. Luck has a strange career in this case. Oswald gets the job. The motorcade passes the building. The rifle is found. Tippit crosses the path. Oswald enters the theater. Ruby gets into the basement. Each event can be defended by itself. Together they look like a row of lights turning on down a hallway. Ruby changes the nature of the crime. Before him, the assassination might still become a trial, however flawed. After him, the nation is left with dead men and documents. Kennedy cannot speak. Tippit cannot speak. Oswald cannot speak. Ruby can speak. But Ruby is a swamp of motives, grief, denial, ego, and possible pressure. If Ruby acted alone, he destroyed the legal center of the case. If Ruby acted for others, he completed the work begun in Dealey Plaza. Either way, his shot took the only living defendant out of the story and replaced cross-examination with speculation. The generous reading is that Jack Ruby was a distraught man who exploited a shameful security failure. The darkest reading is that he was the security failure. By the time he stepped into that basement, Dallas had already given Oswald to the cameras and the myth. Ruby only had to do what the whole weekend had made possible: get close enough to end the case before the case could begin. Chapter 7. The Basement. The transfer should have been invisible. By Sunday morning, Oswald was the most dangerous prisoner in America. Not because he was powerful, but because he was alive. He could speak, deny, name people, contradict evidence, or sit in court while lawyers pulled the case apart piece by piece. Every sensible instinct should have said, move him secretly, move him fast, and keep him away from everyone. Dallas did the opposite. The move to county jail became a public event. Reporters knew it was coming. Cameras waited. The police basement filled with bodies, noise, and confidence. Officers had received threats against Oswald, But the solution was not silence or isolation. The solution was a kind of stage management. That is the ugly part. Oswald was led out in front of cameras, like the last act of a drama already written. He was handcuffed between officers, wearing dark clothing, smaller and more tired than the monster being built in the newspapers. He had spent 2 days denying everything. He had asked for counsel. He had said he was a patsy. Now he was being walked through a crowd. Jack Ruby was in that crowd. No matter what theory you believe, that fact is obscene. A nightclub owner with police contacts, a temper, money trouble, and a gun had reached the basement of the building, holding the accused assassin of the president. He was not across the street. He was not outside a barricade. He was close enough to touch the future of the case. The official story asks for a lot of coincidence. Ruby happened to be downtown. The transfer happened to be delayed. He happened to get into the basement. Oswald happened to emerge at the right moment. Ruby happened to be near the front. Each piece can be defended alone. Together, they feel less like luck than a door opening down a long hallway. The darker version is not complicated. You do not need every officer involved. You do not need a grand speech in a smoky room. You need confusion, access delay, and one man unstable enough to be believable. A real conspiracy does not always look like precision. Sometimes it looks like incompetence arranged in advance. Ruby stepped forward and fired once. Oswald folded into himself, struck in the abdomen, and the basement exploded into motion. The live cameras caught the whole thing. The accused assassin shot while surrounded by police. The country did not merely hear that the system had failed. It watched the failure happen. That bullet changed everything. No trial, no cross-examination, no defense tearing at the rifle, the paper bag, the Tippit witnesses, the backyard photographs, the lineups, the interrogation notes, the Mexico City stories, or the word patsy. The state still had evidence, but it no longer had to place that evidence in front of the accused. If Oswald acted alone, Ruby robbed America of proof. If Oswald had help, Ruby protected someone. If Oswald was framed, Ruby finished the frame. All three possibilities lead to the same place. The only living defendant was removed before the case could become law. That is why the basement matters as much as Dealey Plaza. The first shooting killed the president. The second killed the trial. After Ruby, the Kennedy assassination could only be reconstructed by officials, witnesses, commissions, files, leaks, and arguments. The one man who might have broken the story open was gone. Oswald died at Parkland, the same hospital where Kennedy had died 2 days earlier. The circle was too tight, almost theatrical in its cruelty. By Sunday afternoon, Dallas still had its evidence and its explanations, but the chair at the defense table was empty forever. Chapter 8. The Trial That Never Happened. The most important murder case in American history never reached a courtroom. That is the wound underneath everything. Not the rifle alone, not the grassy knoll, not the motorcade route, not the missing records, strange witnesses, or impossible coincidences. The deepest problem is simpler. The accused man was captured alive, then killed before the law could test the story being built around him. A trial would not have solved every mystery. Trials are human things, full of performance, pressure, error, and strategy. But a trial would have forced the evidence to stand in public. The rifle would have been examined. The paper bag would have been measured. The witnesses to Tippit's murder would have faced cross-examination. The backyard photographs would have been challenged. The lineups would have been attacked. The interrogation notes would have been dragged into daylight. Instead, the case moved from police work to history without passing through justice. That matters because Oswald was not silent. He did not confess and collapse the story into certainty. He denied shooting Kennedy. He denied killing Tippit. He denied owning the rifle. He asked for a lawyer. He said he was a patsy. Maybe those were lies. Maybe they were panic. Maybe they were the desperate noises of a guilty man watching the walls close in. But the courtroom is where those noises were supposed to be sorted. Without that courtroom, every denial became a ghost. The official version could still be written, and it was. Evidence could still be gathered, and it was. Witnesses could still testify before commissions, and they did. But none of that was the same as placing Lee Harvey Oswald at the defense table, while the state tried to prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, that he alone murdered the president. That word alone carried too much weight. Oswald could have been guilty and still not alone. He could have brought the rifle and still been handled. He could have fired a shot and still been part of something larger. He could have been a fool, a fanatic, an informant, a decoy, or a man who thought he was playing one game while others played another around him. The trial was the place where those possibilities should have gone to fight. Instead, they were buried under reports. A lone assassin was the cleanest ending. It gave the country a shape it could survive. One man, one rifle, one damaged life, one terrible act. Anything larger threatened to pull in Cuba, Russia, organized crime, anti-Castro networks, intelligence agencies, oil men, military anger, Dallas extremism, or some poisoned mixture of them all. The lone gunman did not just explain the murder, it protected the nation from the meaning of the murder. That does not make the lone gunman theory false. It makes it useful. Usefulness is not proof, but it is motive. Police need suspects. Newspapers need headlines. A grieving country needs a story it can repeat without falling apart. Oswald, dead and hated, became the perfect container. He could hold the evidence, the anger, the politics, and the fear. He could not object anymore. Ruby's bullet gave everyone a smaller tragedy to manage. Now there was no trial to prepare, no living Oswald to defend himself, no chance of some name slipping out under pressure. The official story could be assembled in rooms where the accused was absent forever. That absence became the engine of the conspiracy. Every document released later, every redaction, every changed statement, every witness who remembered something differently, every odd connection from Oswald's past, every rumor around Ruby, every unexplained contact, every missing tape and sealed file fell into the space where the trial should have been. If Oswald had lived and been convicted, the doubts would still exist, but they would have faced a verdict. If he had lived and exposed others, the world might have changed in ways no one in power wanted to imagine. If he had lived and been acquitted, the official story would have collapsed. None of those futures happened. What happened was colder. The president was dead. The accused assassin was dead. The patrolman was dead. The nightclub owner who killed the accused became the next spectacle. The evidence remained, but the adversary vanished. The case could no longer be argued against a man. It could only be argued against a memory. That is why the assassination never ends. It was not only a murder, it was a murder case with its center removed. The empty chair at the depository became the empty chair at the defense table. And once that chair was empty, America inherited something worse than uncertainty. It inherited an official answer that could never be fully separated from the silence that made it possible. And that is where episode 2 ends, not with a verdict, not with a confession, not with evidence tested in open court, but with silence. Kennedy was dead. Tippit was dead. Oswald was dead. Ruby was alive, but he had made himself the new mystery instead of the answer to the old one. The official story could still be built, reports could still be written, witnesses could still be called, files could still be sealed, opened, redacted, and reopened, but the trial was gone, and with it the cleanest chance America ever had to separate guilt from usefulness, evidence from narrative, and fact from fear. Next time on AI True Crime, we leave the police basement and enter the deeper maze. 4 big theories have followed the Kennedy assassination for more than 60 years. The mob, the intelligence community, the military, and the possibility of friendly fire. Each one offers a different answer to the same terrible question. If Lee Harvey Oswald was not the whole story, who needed John F. Kennedy dead?
Resolve the face. every local cell, a spreadsheet for a living hell. The server racks are running hot, connecting dots the law forgot. System check, the truth in the bit group. System check, finding patterns in the hush. Logic finds what people miss. One last bite, a Judas kiss.